Hello and welcome to this virtual launch event for Letters Never Sent, my new book, and I'm so pleased that it's out, it's released today. Thanks to everybody that's bought a copy. If you haven't bought a copy yet but you're interested, the links are down below. And thanks for joining us here at this virtual launch event. It's quite a good event, I think. I've got me talking about the book, doing some performances. And then also I've sat down with a couple of my poetry friends, Imogen Sterling and Piers and Reed, to catch up with them around sort of their poetry endeavours and what's been going on in their lives, especially around the sort of pandemic and other kind of social issues and moments that we've all experienced over the past year. And then I've got a little performance from each of them also. So over the next hour, this is going to be an absolute poetry feast, a lot of spoken word, and honestly, the guys that we have upcoming, real true talent, so do stick around to check that out. And without further ado, let's get in and talk about this book, which hopefully you've all purchased, and if you haven't, you are going to check out. So this is Letters Never Sent, and I released my first book 4 years ago today, Thoughts of a Dying Youth. And after that, I didn't really know what I was going to do in terms of publication. So I had been working on like music, on doing gigging, selling the book I'd already released, writing, different shows and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, if another book happens, it happens. But when I released the first book, it was very much me collating all of my work and putting it together. And when it came to Letters Never Sent, once I decided I was going to do another book, I thought I will write specifically to certain themes, and I'll go into these themes in a moment, but I thought I'll write specifically to these themes and make sure that, I've sat down and I've written a book. I've written a whole collection of poetry that is based around like pre-existing ideas and notions rather than just the kind of more emotionally led and charged stuff that I'm used to doing, which just kind of comes from like when inspiration hits, rather than sitting down with kind of prompts or ideas about what I'm going to write about. Because so much of my style comes from off the top and like kind of freestyling words and lines and rhymes and then putting them together to create poetry. And this book very much came out of these kind of four themes that I wanted to write about. And those are the themes of love, the themes of self, the themes of religion, and then society. Those are the kind of, when I thought about what poetry should be about and what poets should talk about, those were the kind of four things that came to my mind around the kind of topics that are most commonly discussed. And I thought, well, I'm going to try my hand at writing for each of these themes. And that's exactly what I've done with Letters Never Sent. It's centered around four letters about each of those themes, which is kind of more of my internal monologue around how I feel about certain issues and topics. And then following each of them is a few different poems that explore those themes and ideas, and from a point of having sat down thinking about them and thinking, well, what are the different spins that I can put down to write about? And that's where this has come from. And it's been a long time, because it was ready about a year and a half ago, and I was ready to release it in February last year, and then everything happened and everything stopped. And I'm very much an in-person and performance poet, so a lot of my shows are where I sell my stuff, and like that's where my main revenue stream comes from regarding poetry. It's never really worked for me on the online space, so I always thought, well, I want to put it off until I can go out gigging again, because that's where I connect with people, that's where people like connect with my work and tend to buy the book. And obviously it's not everything is motivated by revenue, but it is still a commercial venture, so I still want to sell these, so I put it on the back burner for a long time. And then what I found at the end of last year is that I didn't have any more creative output. So I put out an EP in October last year, just a bit of fun for me, just to sort of stretch my creativity. There was no real, I wasn't planning to sell 1 million copies of an album or something like that. But afterwards, I just couldn't move past the fact that this was here and it was ready to go, and I hadn't put it out. So I decided that I was going to put it out today, 4 years since my first one, and basically get it out there in the world. I'll be gigging again in 2-3 months, so it's not too long to wait until I'm back on the road. But I just thought the best time to get it out would be on the anniversary of Thoughts of Dying Youth, and I'm so glad I've done it. The smile on my face should show you that I'm really pleased with this book, and I'm so glad that people have started to buy it already and people are already enjoying it, and I really do hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to basically, over the next 15 or so minutes, I'm going to read works from Letters Never Sent. And I'm going to try and go through each of the themes that I spoke about earlier and give you at least one poem from each of them areas. Usually my stuff is written to perform because I'm a performing poet. That's what I love to do. I love to be on stage talking, and so much of my stuff is around that performance sort of element. But there is stuff in here which has specifically been written for the page. So you're going to kind of probably notice the ones that are written more for this page and more for performance just from the way that I do it. But without further ado, I'm going to take a quick drink and then we're going to jump in and I will start performing. Drink is water, by the way. It's not like Dutch courage or anything like that. Literally just... Okay, so the first poem I wanted to read is from the love section of the book, which is right up top. It's called XI. It's a second part, but the first part is very much page poetry. The second is about performance. I tried to merge those elements in. So this is the one I'm going with. It's called XI. Hope you enjoy it. I am so in love with you. It really is that simple. But at times it's easily described as extraordinary and ethereal. It's not elementary, my dear, it's a problem that we've dared to solve. A deity designed tour de force that was meant to break the mold. The parts all fit so perfectly, each piece prerequisite to the puzzle. Sketching out simplicity against a background made of muddle. I am so in love with you. It's all that I see clear. It'll be that way today, tomorrow, and for the next 1,000 years. My mouth smiles each time I say it. I am so in love with you. But that real feeling of happiness comes from knowing you love me too. Well, yeah, it's quite weird recording to just myself because usually what would happen, I'd say that last line and they'd be cheering and people would be like ripping off their shirts, swinging around their heads, frothing at the mouth, going mental. It just... But, you know, I don't really know how I'm going to end it. It's going to be awkward little bits in between like this. Probably not even funny, sorry. The next one is also in the love section, but it's about what happens when love sours. And it is called Nothings. We were two nothings on a collision course. When we hit, we would birth a universe. We'd create life, art, beauty, an explosive rainbow that would bear a billion galaxies within each of its colours, but something went awry along the way. I was late to pick you up more times than you could handle. You'd seen one too many superhero movies and I grew sick of finding hairs in the bathtub. I've done the calculations. These petty grievances combined should never exceed the sum of our parts, but neither of us is a mathematician. We decided it was a science, but you got a C at GCSE chemistry and I could never quite make the grade as an academic, so what should we do? Should we butt heads and pray for that big bang? Or return to nothings once more? So that's the love section. Not that that's not all of it, there's a lot more. That's just two pieces from the love section right up top in the book. And then the second section, which I decided that I was going to try and tackle with my pen, is the religious section. So strap in for that. I actually, before we press on, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Joanna Bacur for these awesome illustrations that she's put in the book. We really worked together on these to make sure that they fit the theme of what the poems are about and to really make the work come together. And honestly, it looks beautiful. She's done so well. So it's such an amazing artist. So definitely, I'll put links to all of her stuff below. Please do check it out. But now, strap in for some religious poetry. So, one of the things I really wanted to do with this is I wanted to make sure that I was working hard to write to different themes and to different styles almost in a way. And one of the ways I thought to do it would be to sort of assume the identity of somebody else. And in the religious section, I mean, there's a great poem where I pretend I'm Joan of Arc, if anyone wants to check that out, sort of French religious heretic. But also, there's a piece which I'm going to read now, which is called Frollo, in which I am Judge Frollo. Again, French religious heretic. I don't think he's a heretic, actually. He was extremely devout religious. But this is called Frollo, and it's I'm not going to analyse it for you. I was going to, but I'll leave it up to you to analyse it and to see the genius in the work rather than me explaining it to you, because if you explain your own poems, they're probably not very good. But this is very much one that I've written for the page rather for performance, so you'll probably notice that kind of element more to it. And let's just jump in. Frollo. Her delicate dance demonstrates to me she is the devil. Infernal incarnate ignites fire within me, a scorching desire that seeks no sanctuary. Dogmatic devotion dissolves deep inside me. A godlessness fuels this once holy man. Delusions of grandeur pull apart praying hands. He stands, dominated, drooling, warm-blooded. He too is lost to demonic dictatum. My blade is sharp as I stand in the shadows, my bedeviled hand succumbing to instinct. She disturbs her dress as she falls to the floor, disrobes herself as she calls him forth. He drops to his knees, worshipping at an altar of disgrace. A soldier now slave to a succubus spell, he climbs atop her. As I emerge, preparing to free him from sin, my knife lifted high like the cup of Christ and driven down through the blades of his back. Blood spills from his sternum, staining her face. She lay too dumbfounded to scream. Her red wine lips call me to communion. I steal a taste of heaven that will condemn me to hell. Then, like Elijah, I flee. But the enchantress Esmeralda will forever burn within me. Yeah, mind blown, I guess. Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Not the Disney version, the book, because I'm intellectual and that. Although I couldn't tell you who wrote it. No, I can, but I'm not. I shan't. You tell me who wrote it, because I just want to see if you know. But yeah, so there is, like I say, there's a lot of different themes that I kind of tried to pull through with this book, and I have had such a great time writing it. It's quite kind of weird. I've never performed that out loud before. Performed that for the first time there. I actually quite enjoyed it. It's quite different to my normal style, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked reading it. I'm glad I can still read after months and months and months of sitting alone at my laptop screen. So I'm glad I can still actually process words in a book, something real and tangible. But anyway, yeah, let's move on to section 3 of the book. Section 1 was love, 2 is religion. What's 3? Oh, it's self, me. I have always spoken about me in my poetry, and it's one of the biggest criticisms that I get from people sort of in the poetry scene, is that my stuff's very self-revolved. It doesn't really talk about many of the big issues, but I just want to say wait, because the big issues are going to come. So if you're from the poetry scene and you're thinking, oh, he's getting to the bit where he just talks about himself, yeah, deal with it. There's going to be some bits for you in a minute, probably. I don't know. Stick around for Piers. He's really good. But yeah, so section 3 is about me. It's about self. And there's some stuff in here that it's not just about me. It's about the kind of idea of self, and it's about kind of self-experiences and all that kind of stuff. But with that said, the piece I actually am going to read is about what happens after the apocalypse, which is a bit weird now, because I haven't experienced the apocalypse. Maybe you're watching this in 100 years' time and you have experienced the apocalypse, and if you have and you're offended, I'm very sorry. But do know that I didn't mean to offend any apocalypse-dwelling people when I wrote this piece. I actually wrote it for a short film that one of my friends produced. It's called Wander. I think it's a great piece, so I'm just going to jump in and read it out to you guys now. All I ever hear is footsteps, footsteps, footsteps. In front of me there's nothing, and behind me there's much less. I'm calling this the future because history is dead, and I have nothing left to fear except the demons in my head, but I still have to hear the screaming as the evil creatures fed. I watched them tear limb from limb, separate bodies from heads, but they've since gone extinct. In rotting pieces they all rest. All I ever see is hurt, hurt, hurt. In front of me is rubble, and behind me there's just dirt. We could not foresee the troubles that were laying upon this earth. All this pain and struggle is probably less than we deserve, because we thought ourselves as kings when these godlike things emerged. All I ever taste is pain, pain, pain. Through days I trudge forward, but at nights I go insane. And so I roll this dice and play this existential game, but no matter how much I move, the view remains the same. All I ever do is wander. Thank you very much for listening in, and if you're still here, thanks. Please do keep sticking it out. We are pushing through quickly, and I've got to section 3 now, and I was going to talk a bit more. I was going to do a bit more kind of self poetry from Letters Never Sent, but actually I have a few pieces that I would rather do, a few longer pieces than what I usually do. If you obviously listening in now, you realise that a lot of my pieces sub 1 minute. I like to get to the point and get out of there. Don't like to be too convoluted, stretch it out too much. But I have 2 pieces that I really want to do. And this is more into the society theme. These are in the society sections of Letters Never Sent. And actually, I really want to kind of get to them, and I want to do these pieces now. And I know earlier I said that kind of, you know, people from the poetry scene love the society stuff or whatever, and that's what they want to hear. But this is nothing to do with them. These 2 pieces that I'm going to do now, 5 Lives Lost and Revelations, are 2 pieces that to me mean a lot. They're the 2 pieces that Revelations, I perform it at the end of every set that I do, and I have done now for 2 years. 5 Lives Lost, I've only ever performed once, which was the day after it was written. But to me, they're some of my best work. They're some of the pieces that I feel take me out of that box of, you know, being so self-concerned, and actually do show that there are a lot of wider issues that I can write about. But a lot of the time, I don't want to write about some big issues because either I don't have the context, or I feel like me talking about them isn't necessarily helpful, and I would just be taking away a platform from somebody who's probably more qualified. But with that said, let's start up top with 5 Lives Lost. Then I'm going to read Revelations, and then we'll go into the interview with Piers and Imogen, and then we'll listen to those guys do their honestly fantastic poetry. I cannot wait to enjoy it myself. So 5 Lives Lost. 5 lives lost last night. 5 bodies found in the English capital. London, city of stabbings. London, the great when. When did it turn into this? Our inhabitants do not feel safe on these streets. Exploring the East could become a ripper walk, regardless of whether or not you paid your £10. We fear being opened up with the same enthusiasm of children tearing into wrapping paper. Happy birthday, Dad. I'm sorry I could not be there today. I'm busy bleeding my life into London sewers because some lost boys decided I should never grow up. When we were kids, we could fly. But happy thoughts are now just distant memories buried in concrete and steel. And still, when you see who's being stabbed, and by whom, is anyone really surprised? It's an actual quote from a tabloid newspaper website. Who? Hannah Leonard? Christopher Bowman? Daniel Frederick? No, you salivate at the thought of reading about Arman Shakur, Israel Organsola, Sadiq Mohammed, names you refuse to learn how to pronounce through fear they would leave the tip of your tongue dirty. By who? A city that cares not for them? A system built on structured violence, like my ancestors sailing across the seas in celebrated past centuries to steal land from the very same people. A payment of dirt could never be enough. Now we demand blood. Oi, blood! I swear that's the man we don't like. Let's hype and fight. I'm not sure why. Grab, jab and stab. Say goodnight to the bad guy. And that's the issue. Boiled down to a stereotype and an Instagram video. 65,000 views, 56,000 likes. Hashtag stop the violence. There's 52 lives lost this year and 5 lives lost last night. Thank you so much for being here and listening in. I really do appreciate everybody that's made the effort to join now or was watching the video at a later date. So yeah, I really do appreciate that. And I think for me now, this is probably my signing off point with my last piece, Revelations. And it ends with a speech, not by me, by comedian Bill Hicks, But originally, when I had done this poem, the way it was always going to be, because it was the last poem of my set, it was going to be that I would perform the piece, and then there would be like a projection, Bill Hicks finishing it, doing his speech at the end, and I would project it, and then I'd walk away in like a cool, artsy, edgy fashion, like drop, mic drop, I'm out, boom. But then what started happening is that I started doing more and more kind of intimate shows, and it didn't seem right to have like the video, or we just couldn't do it for whatever reason, logistical reasons. So I started to just perform the speech myself. And what I did to not get sued for plagiarism, I just put my hand up kind of when it wasn't me speaking, when it was Bill Hicks, and perform it. And I wanted to put the Bill Hicks bit in here, but because of how many times now I've done it without him and it's just been me talking, I kind of feel a bit more like that's what the work has become. So I'm going to do it like that, and I'm going to do the Bill Hicks speech. I haven't performed this piece in such a long time. It's in my head. I'm very, very sorry if it doesn't come out right, but I really hope it does. It's in the book. I could read it. I could read it, to be fair, but let's do it from memory. But it's also the last bit in the book, and it's really fitting. It's the last poem in the book, and this is Revelations. She spoke with the soul of Maya Angelou and the voice of Virilyn. She told me her problems: poverty, misogyny, racism. And there I was moaning about motion sickness from my PlayStation. She laughed. She said, "That's called perspective." And I reflected on that until the day we met again. This time I didn't talk, I just heard. When she described how she'd been treated worse than anyone ever could have deserved. From the arsehole in the club with his hands upon her waist, to the bastard on the bus who had spat into her face. I apologised, but she said she'd wait for the day that women inherited the earth. And with that, I fell in love. Not with her, but with her ideas. Despite her fears, she could never be brought to tears. Her skeleton stretched to keep her head held high, a sign her spine would never be broken. Despite how many times she'd encounter closed minds, her heart would remain open. She didn't scream or shout to get her feelings out. Instead, she exposed injustices through mere chatter, mirroring the words of a dead comedian, though this is no laughing matter. The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real because that's how powerful our minds are. It goes up and down and round and round. It has frills and chills, and it's very brightly coloured, and it's very loud. And it's fun for a while. Now, some people have been on the ride for a very long time, and they begin to question, hey, is this real, or is it just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us and they say, don't worry about anything, ever, because it's just a ride. And we kill those people. You ever notice that? How we kill the good guys and let the demons run amok? But it's just a ride. And we can change it any time. No work, no effort, no savings of money. It's a choice between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to buy guns, put locks on your doors and close yourself off. The eyes of love, instead, see us all as one. Here's what we can do to make the world a better ride right now. Take all the money we spend on weapons and defence each year and use it to feed, clothe and educate the poorest people of the world, which it would, million times over, not one human being excluded. And we can explore space, both inner and outer, together, forever, in peace. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining and listening to me and letting me indulge in this spoken word career fantasy of mine that I am living. I really, really appreciate it. So much love to everybody that's supported, whether it's just checking out the links, the videos, buying the book, whatever you've done to support. I really, really appreciate it. And that is my performance for the evening done. And we are going to just jump over straight now into the interview with Piers Harrison Reed and Imogen Sterling. And I will see you on the other side. Cool. So I am here with Piers Harrison Reed and Imogen Sterling, two fantastic poets and artists that I very much admire both their work, and I'm very pleased that you've both decided to join me for this virtual book launch. And I know we have performances from both of you coming up later, but ahead of that, I just really wanted to have a chat with you around sort of what you've been up to over like the last year with the pandemic and all kinds of other stuff, and then a few questions around kind of poetic output, what sort of stuff you're doing in like the art scene and that kind of thing. Because for me, the last 18 months or whatever it's been of the pandemic, my whole poetry world kind of collapsed. Like I had a performance
the night before lockdown happened, and I performed at that, and it was an open mic, like a slam thing, and it was really good. And then I had another one scheduled for the week after, which obviously never happened. But it was really weird because my whole kind of performing and poetry world kind of inverted, because I was living in London, working in London, and I was doing so many gigs and shows in London. I hadn't really thought about what I was doing sort of in the digital space, or what I was putting out sort of commercially. But the pandemic made me rethink that, and I poured all my kind of energy into finishing the book that I've been working on for a long time and getting it all polished, as well as a few other kind of little projects and things, just to keep me busy, as well as kind of putting out stuff that I really wanted to like pull together for a long time. I guess it gave me that extra time to focus on my things. And I suppose my first question, let's start with you, Piers, is how has the pandemic kind of affected you in terms of your professional life, but also like in terms of what you've been doing in the poetry scene and with your spoken word stuff?
Yeah, it's been a strange year. Like I was working out that I isolated around about a week before Boris officially said to isolate, because the government were really quite slow in regards to kind of infection control for this pandemic. So the first day I isolated was actually a year ago yesterday. It was the 15th of March, which is like wild, really, realistically. But because of my day job as a A&E nurse, I wanted to be a bit more careful. And my partner was already isolating from a few days previously, because she was like, we need to start taking this really seriously, because it's not going away. So like over that full year now, it's been very up and down. I worked a lot in A&E in the first wave of the pandemic, so I was working up to like 60-hour weeks, and so I really wasn't writing all that much at the time, but there was a lot of things that I was kind of actively trying to create in the back of my mind. And I was lucky enough with the Black Lives Matter movement last year to be asked by the BBC and CNN to write kind of around that subject. Probably 8 months ago now. It's been a kind of crazy year. And that was the first time I think my work, I kind of put my work into a space where the feedback was potentially going to be a bit less like positive than the poetry community generally is, because you're writing about stuff that is contentious. It shouldn't be, but writing about stuff that's contentious around Black lives. And so it was the first time I kind of had to really approach my art head on in the digital space and accept that I'm going to get some people who aren't necessarily the biggest fans. And so it was the first time I kind of had to step away from the digital space, considering how isolated I already was, maybe not the best for my mental health, but the first time I had to step away just because of the amount of kind of abuse I was receiving online for those pieces, which is in direct contrast to a piece that I released with the BBC like a few weeks earlier around the pandemic and around the NHS, still through the BBC. And one second. So around the pandemic and around the BBC, which was for the NHS, which was much better received and was essentially just saying how much the NHS has changed over the course of the pandemic and what we were doing with it at the time. It's kind of the first time I had to like actually think about the people that we are on stage, being seen in the digital space in a completely different way to the way that you intend it to be. But yeah, it's been a wild year. It's been a wild year. I've been working a lot at the moment on kind of a variety of projects, and I think the year has kind of taken its toll on my creative expression, because I'm just really struggling to create. I'm really struggling to behave like I used to, and I think that's just getting tired of isolation, getting tired of lockdown. And I think there's a lot of people in the same boat where we just kind of want it to be over now. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to shout at each other on stage again and look into strangers' eyes properly. And I can't wait, to be honest.
Definitely. I can't wait for that first gig after lockdown. I wouldn't know if I still have the kind of capacity to perform in front of crowds. But yeah, what about you, Imogen? Like, how has your kind of work been throughout the pandemic? Because I'm right, you're a full-time artist, right? Full-time artist of Literature. So in a very so that's a very fortunate position. But then obviously something like this comes along and it's completely probably eradicates your revenue stream, as well as sort of your ability to do what you want to do. So do you want to kind of talk to that point?
Yeah, totally. I mean, 2020 was a really strange year. It had a strange start for me as well, because I had a tour planned through Australia and London for kind of January, February time. and it was at the very last minute cancelled, kind of because of the like impending pandemic, but also because of bushfires in Australia. So already I'd had my creative world kind of shaken. Obviously, that was like 2 months of my career that I'd planned out, that I'd blocked out as not kind of performing, gigging, working in the UK. So I'd kind of just rebuilt that at the time that the coronavirus hit. So it was a really shocking creatively start to the year for me. And it was hard. I had and still have a year down the line 2 different theatre shows in development. I think it'll be a year tomorrow for us in Scotland. The theatres were shut down, so we were in rehearsal March 17th last year when the team came in and told us that this was our last chance to be in a theatre space and that our show was going to be indefinitely postponed. And I don't know, it's been a mix of a year. Like at first it was really frightening. I think in the space of about a week or something had literally my entire year's work cancelled or indefinitely postponed, which was just really wild. And so I think I've really panicked initially and pushed very hard to move stuff online. So I was doing a lot of live stream gigs. I do a lot of kind of workshop facilitation and community outreach roles too. So really trying to put them online. And it was fine to an extent. It worked to an extent for that little period when everyone was quite enjoying the digital space and really, jumping into everybody's live gig. And there was a sort of unsettling novelty about it all that did somehow make it somehow strangely bearable, and you were getting audiences and stuff. But I think kind of across the board that petered out quite quickly. Digital events and performance spaces just are not the same as live work. And then I was lucky because I got a writing residency with a book festival up here near Glasgow, and that really has seen me through for the majority of the past year, which was lovely. It was a very creative role and also a very, albeit online, community focused role. So I was interacting with people, leading workshops all the time. I'd have like 10, 15 people on my screen. You could kind of pretend that you were surrounded by people. It's been nice trying to continue these theatre shows in isolation, separated from the rest of the team is really hard. There was a sort of temporary lift in the lockdown up here, like just before Christmas, where we managed to get back into a theatre space and have a good like 2-week intensive rehearsal period. And now, I mean, I've had a lot of time to kind of rewrite the show of my own that I was working on, which has been really nice. That space has been really appreciated. But yeah, in general, it's been hard. It's just felt like a constant hustle, constantly precarious. The digital realm getting more and more saturated as time goes on. So it's had ups and downs.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually both of you brought up interesting points that I kind of wanted to discuss anyway. But seeing as we just finished with you, Imogen, let's just talk about like the digital fatigue element of things. So I think you're definitely right. At the start of lockdown, there was a lot of appetite from people to check stuff out online and also offer support to like their friends or people that were like in the art space and struggling. I think there's a lot of that, and quite I started a YouTube channel during the first lockdown, not related to my poetry at all. It's like music reviews and reactions, and like I got 500,000 views in like that short space of time. Like it's insane, but that's obviously now dropped off because of the digital. Like we say, everyone's tired. You sit in front of a screen pretty much all day. You don't really want to spend your social life doing that. But do you think that once we return to normal, that there is still going to be appetite for a lot of live stream stuff where people, particularly on like a Friday night or a Thursday night, think, I don't really want to go out tonight, but I would like to log into that live gig. Do you think there's going to be more appetite for that because of this? Or do you think it's something that people are going to be, cannot wait to get out, and it's going to be like the live shows and stuff are going to boom again?
I think it's difficult. I think it would be really nice for there to be some crossover and some stuff online still, because I think there's a lot of people, across the board who have noticed that working from home suits them quite well, and actually these digital spaces sometimes make art a bit more accessible to people who can't go out into public as easily, or don't feel comfortable performing on stage but feel more comfortable in their own homes. So I think that if there is a way of creating those spaces and continuing those spaces moving forwards, I think that'd be really positive. But I just think it does, like Imogen said, it loses some of the spark of live performance for some reason to see it through screen. There's not that tangible feeling of having someone in the same space as you and you kind of sharing that present moment that you get when you're in public, you know, on a stage. So I'd like to say that it will, but I'm not sure it'll continue. Definitely not at this scale. And I'd really like to see it continuing, partly because it opens a space across the world. You know, it makes art a bit more global, and you can potentially be on a open mic or poetry lineup with a group of American poets or a group of European poets, or you know, and that seems really interesting and exciting to me. But is whether that continues.
Yeah, totally. Like the accessibility of digital spaces really is such a bonus. Like again, with this book festival that I was working with, it's called the Paisley Book Festival, and Paisley is a town like not it's really not far from Glasgow at all. It's probably like a 15-minute drive, like 25-minute bus or train journey. But just because it's separated from the city, people wouldn't often make the effort to go just because it's not, you know, it's not there, it's not happening
For
in
sure.
Glasgow. So certainly like a lot of people were possibly attending the book festival's events that might not have ordinarily, and you know, with stuff that's pre-recorded too that you can watch later, you can watch on demand, it gives you that scope to work around your own schedule and your own kind of priorities and stuff. So like, the accessibility of it is great, but it is just, it's like you say, it's when everything you're doing, your work, your socializing, your events are all in the same space. You're literally like sitting in your living room, your bedroom, staring at a screen. It's just, it's not exciting. It's really, there's constant distractions, and it's, I don't know, I think it's nice that things will hopefully move a bit more online. And of course I think there will be a whole lot of anxiety about returning to live events and live spaces. I think certainly there'll be a whole host of people really excited to jump back into the real world, into these real creative social spaces, but quite a lot of reservation too. So it'll be nice if some element of digital art remains to kind of compensate for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me personally, one of the things that like I realized that I used to do, which I think now I don't think I really want to ever do again, is like the rush hour tube. Like being on the tube with people when like I'm standing there and I'm in one guy's armpit, there's a girl in my armpit, and I'm just like, that was insane to me that we would pack onto those tubes like that. And now I'm like, I never want to have to do that again. I know I eventually will have to, but there's definitely going to be kind of anxiety there and stuff around that. The kind of next point I wanted to touch on is that just because there's been a pandemic, it doesn't mean that there hasn't been other great issues and stuff that's brought to light. I think Piers put up with BLM. Obviously, we've had Sarah Everard. And one of the big kind of criticisms I've had throughout my career doing poetry is that a lot of my stuff is focused on self, and it's my experience of like mental health or that kind of stuff. And as much as that resonates with people within my core audience and also people when I do shows, a lot of people have always kind of said, well, I want you to do more. I want you to write about the issues, and I want you to write about so once whatever, you know. But so if we go back to BLM, I didn't feel comfortable writing about that, because as much as I believe in the sentiment and I'm an ally, I don't think my voice is particularly helpful in that conversation, nor is it necessarily wanted. And it's the same with the current like sort of female voice that's needed for this sort of gender-based violence debate that's happening now. And as much as I said, like with this, my new book here, I have like sort of broadened my horizons, and I talk about religion, I talk about society, and I talk about sort of things away from my own experience a bit more. But do you think that sort of has there been kind of calls? I know, Piers, you said like you've been called on to do NHS poems and poems by BLM. Do you think like as poets and as artists, we have a duty to comment on these kind of wider societal issues, or is it really expected of us to do so?
I think it makes people uncomfortable, both creatives and consumers of art, sometimes, and I think that's probably a positive thing. You know, the whole cliche of speaking truth to power, I think, is really important for the poetry that I consume and create. Sometimes people feel like it's not honest and true. You're doing it for, you know, clicks and stuff, but it is, you know, it's the stuff which I like to create and consume, so it's what I'll continue doing. Whether that is the same for everybody, I think is debatable. I don't necessarily feel like you should have to talk about bigger issues if it's not the way you think and the way you interact in public. I don't think you should be doing it just in order to get clout, because I think that's is, you know, it's not true to you and it's not true to the art, and it usually, I think, will come across in the work that you create if you genuinely don't believe these things and you're just creating it to be able to be, you know, on the front page of Instagram. Like that's people aren't going to resonate with that, I don't think, personally. I think poetry and oral history has had such a big impact on popular consciousness for so long, because people can use it as a vehicle to talk about bigger issues, but also because you don't necessarily have to, and it can appeal to such a wide church, because some people don't want to engage with those big issues when they're trying to relax on the weekend, you know, and some people do. So that's a very vague, roundabout way of saying I don't think it necessarily matters, but I think there should always be space for political discussions within poetry.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, I don't think that artists have an obligation at all to become the kind of spokesperson for whatever it might be. But at the same time, art and creativity is is a brilliant vehicle for expression. But I think something that's really, really important to me when it comes to spoken word in particular is that it's a very vulnerable art form. Like, you are literally putting yourself and your words and your experiences and your stories on a literal platform in front of often strangers, and that is a very, I don't know, it can be very vulnerable, and it's important both to protect yourself as the performer and the speaker, but also the people that you are directly speaking to, often without any warning of what you're going to say. And it's something that's on my mind a lot recently, because the show that I've been developing this past year with a new theatre company is called Text Me When You Get Home, and it's all about, it's Glasgow specific, our story, but it's basically to do with female safety and women's kind of hypervigilance on nights out. And obviously it's always been a relevant story to tell, but very immediate at the moment. But it's difficult because I think us as a company feel very much like we now are, like, the spotlight is on us to an extent. We really need to properly do justice to this topic and make a show that really, you know, changes things and keeps conversation going. But at the same, you have to protect yourself as the performer, because you're drawing on vulnerable experiences in order to share a message and to tell a story. So I think it's just whatever you are comfortable with and whatever is kind of safe for you to do.
I guess going back to what you asked, Tom, whether it was an obligation to talk about these things. I don't think it's an obligation to talk about them, but I think it's an obligation to do them justice. And it's an obligation to talk about them in a respectful way, both for yourself and the audience. And I think that you don't want to wander into that thing thinking there's an obligation to talk about it, but not necessarily having anything to say, or not being able to say it in a respectful way. Because I think that's the kind of thing which brings, I think, poetry into disrepute. You know, you look at the kind of classic slam voice, and people seeming like they're kind of performing their way through a trauma which maybe they either haven't lived or haven't understood. And I think that feels disingenuous to most audiences. So I think, you know, good luck with that project, Imogen, because I think it's you know, obviously it's a hot topic at the moment. It's unfortunately always a hot topic. But I think especially now, like you said, there's going to be a lot of eyes on you guys, you know, really doing this story justice. And you know, I think it's a really exciting place to be as a creative, I think. But also I think it rightly can be terrifying because you want to do it justice. So.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case, and I think authenticity is definitely the key. So again, I'm not always against writing about wider issues, but like, I know my position, and I know when it's relevant for me to comment on stuff, and I know if I don't have the right context, then there's no point, because like you say, not only does it come across as disingenuous, it can come across as offensive and harmful, and also just in terms of like personal self, it just makes you realize kind of how much you don't understand about the topic and the subject. And I would rather read 100 books and write a terrible poem about some social issue that I know nothing about, you know. I guess sure. So writing and editing is again something that like I get asked about quite a lot. So a lot of the times people ask sort of like, how do you write, how often do you write, and those kind of things. With my first book, it was all kind of spoken word stuff that I'd sat and performed for years and years and years, and I just kind of collated into a collection. But with this one, Letters Never Sent, this is a book I sat down and I wrote and I edited the poems, and I'd never really edited my work before. And so some of them are like pure spoken word stuff, so that's just stuff I don't really edit, because I usually talk that into existence and then it exists and I write it down. But on the whole, a lot of this is more sort of page poetry that I've taken the time to edit and rework until it means what I want it to mean and it flows how I want it to flow. And so that's my kind of writing process. But I wanted to kind of ask you guys how you pull your works together and where you draw your inspiration from, and like how you actually finally get to your finished piece.
Do you want to go first, Imogen?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's something that's on my mind quite a lot at the moment. I've been working on my show Love the Sinner for a really long time now because COVID has delayed it so much. And it's a like long form poetry show, but it is kind of like a collation of numerous poems and kind of monologues into one full thing. That I hope will exist as a live show one day, but as a sort of full collection in the meantime. And it's funny because just now, I mean, it takes me ages to edit things. I like to write with very kind of meticulous rhyme scheme, and it's almost like some sort of maths equation. Like it takes me so long to work through. But for this project, I'm working alongside a dramaturg to sort of edit the stuff as I go. And it's just, I found it really difficult, to be honest, because I find poetry really hard to edit. Like it takes me so long to put one piece together that when someone comes along and they're like, let's scrap half of that and just, change the direction, it's really, I don't know, it's been really difficult to me. I get very attached to my work and very sort of aware of criticism. So I've found that's maybe been a really nice learning curve actually over the sort of past year or so. This writer helping me to just sort of loosen my grip on things and be much more malleable when it comes to the structure and voice of poetry. And I mean, I'm not very good at kind of writing bitterly. Like I always have to sit in this intensive period and space to do so. And just, try and just get it all out as one. But yeah, certainly I've really found that loosening my grip a little bit and letting somebody else into the process has been an immense shift in just sort of widening my own vision. Really, really.
I don't think I could do that. I think it has to be.
That's what I thought too, but it's been really eye-opening.
Fair enough. What about you, Piers?
I think my process is a little bit different. I mean, naturally, I think I write in, like Imogen says, bitterly. So I will have like a few lines that come to me on some idle Tuesday, and I'll think that's a really good line. That's linked to something which I want to speak, at some point, in a much more in depth. And so previously, when I started writing, it would be a long process of collecting those little odds and ends into something which then has meaning, and kind of bringing them together, performing them a lot on stage, and editing down through a kind of really long drawn out process. But recently, because I've been doing more commissions and I've been having to work to a deadline, which isn't, my forte anyway, I've had to do a lot more kind of sit down, right, I need to do this now, pull together some of the ideas that I've had, but also kind of force myself to think about things in a creative way, force myself through writing exercises, in order to, kind of create a piece which I really think speaks to that particular topic. And so I've really struggled with that. I've really struggled with editing, I think, ruthlessly enough, because I think sometimes I can be very verbose in the way that I speak, and very meandering in some of my images. I think my process needs to be really, really heavily more ruthless with editing in order to get to the kind of place I want to be with my work. And so, yeah, I think an external voice helping you with that seems like it would be really useful for me, because I'm not writing, stage shows at the moment. I probably wouldn't be able to go down the same path, but I've tried to ask for help from other poets, around me. And actually, I think poets are just kind of too nice a lot of the time. They don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to feel like they've killed your babies. So I think sometimes they're very reluctant to be as ruthless as we need to be to create the kind of art to the level that really we owe ourselves. So yeah, it's been a process. I'm not very connected to my pieces, to the point where I think that what I've created is perfect enough that it doesn't need any criticism. I think it always needs criticism, and any criticism is valid to an extent. I think at the end of the day, you still need to be your own kind of barometer for what is good and bad. So if someone says, oh, that needs changing, and you're like, nah, it doesn't, then you still kind of have to hold that true to yourself. Otherwise, you're not the artist, are you? You're kind of you're more of a blank canvas as other people have their take on it. So I think I've always been quite happy to take criticism, but it's struggling to get that from somewhere that is both respectable and also ruthless enough, which I struggle with. So yeah, it's my process has changed quite dramatically recently.
Poets should be willing to hurt your feelings, because so much great art comes from hurt feelings. Like, they should know.
Yeah.
They should be sticking the knife straight in.
Yeah, going straight for the jugular.
See, I find quite often with my stuff, when I write it and I have it performed, I find like it reflects a way I was feeling at a very specific time, and that's why I don't like kind of messing with it like too much longer after it's been finished. But what I have found recently is the stuff that I wrote maybe 5 years ago, I now perform slightly differently, because it still kind of is somewhat like reflective of who I am as a person now, but maybe like certain ideas or like sort of perceptions of myself have changed. So maybe I sort of put different inflections on certain words to shift the meaning ever so slightly, but it's still as authentic to me, but it's not authentic to me who wrote it. Do you know what I mean? But guys, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our chat here, but I've covered off everything I wanted to ask you, and I think that people will find interesting. And I know we're going to have 2 amazing performances from both of you straight after this chat, but I really just want to say thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for just joining and having a good chat with us and sharing your insights, and thanks, basically.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Speak soon, guys.
Okay, welcome back. That was honestly, I had such a great time talking with those guys. I really, really enjoyed what they had to say around all the kind of topics. I think we could have had it go for another hour, but Zoom has limits. So we just kept it as poignant as possible, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And now we are about to hear from Piers Harrison Reed. He's got a short set, and after that I'll be back to introduce Imogen Sterling, and stick with.
Hey folks, so my name is Piers Harrison Reed, and I've been asked to kind of join in this project by Tom. I'm so happy to be here. I haven't got much time, so I'll roll into it. This first piece is dedicated to healthcare students during the COVID pandemic who've kind of been forgotten about, thrown in at the deep end, underpaid, undervalued, and asked to do things far and above the competency that we expect of them. I've been qualified for about 5 years now, and they've had to do so much more than I would have had to do in a similar position. So in association with the UEA where I went, we've released this piece probably about 8 months ago now to say thank you to the healthcare students who've picked up the slack from an underfunded NHS. I hope you enjoy it. To all healthcare students, potential, current, finally finished, lifelong, thank you. Keep going. Always keep growing. Our work is never over. Thank you, therapists, for all your passion and energy, paramedics and ODPs for your undervalued independence, doctors, researchers, pharmacists for all your focused intellect and all the roles in between and assistants unsung, and my nurses. Thank you for caring and keeping the ship afloat in mental health, learning disability, pediatrics, and midwifery. Thank you all for tirelessly fighting to find out where we interlock and overlap, adapting and extending this jigsaw puzzle of best practice. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and our work is never over. Though our mission is vague, you're never alone. Your love is part of something large. Be phenomenal. You've already chosen love over an easy life, so lean in, do different. Let us become the giant shoulders our children stand on. Know that the road may be rough. The world is troubled. Others will not understand your struggle. But believe me, there are ways of coping. There's a kindness in all things. All shall be well, and you shall not be overcome. And yet, if all else fails, and you find yourself flailing in the light, fight to remember the one thing more concrete than this campus. Patients are our everything. We unwrap ourselves to interweave with strangers' stories, become a friendly face to their furrowed brow, oases in their illness, or kind comfort through their fragmented minds. Fall into the universe in newborn eyes and breathe in the sacred air as engagement rings are slipped onto hospital-gloved fingers, or tears roll behind visors and over surgical masks. Be present in the absence of breath after failing to squeeze the warmth back into her hands, and be hurt by the men's voices all rugged and bevel-tipped as they spiral, until they too soften into tears cracked by all the memories we never knew, and weighed down by the wavering words of, "She would have really liked that. Thank you for being there." We must lullaby people's brokenness. We're all scared. It makes us human, but we must breathe our fears forwards and grow through them. Our competence must be filled, dynamic, with radical honesty. And thank you, students, after night shifts, for seeing the Celadon Glaze summer sunrise, crisp in the mist, the seagulls pealing electric into the empty air, filling the sky with vowels. Thank you. And some students are known for writing art. Our care becomes art. Our art saves lives. And our work is never over. Okay, so like I said, I haven't got much time. I hope you enjoyed that piece. It's called Two Healthcare Students. It was released by the UEA and it can be found on YouTube and their website, probably Facebook somewhere. This is another brand new piece. I haven't got much time to do it, so I'm going to really shorten it. A really kind, hard-working colleague of mine died a couple weeks ago of COVID, and she was very well loved. And I wanted to write a piece about her, about losing a colleague and how to grieve for that, because it's kind of a strange space. And this is what I came up with. It's called To Estrella. The much longer piece is online, set to I Giorni by Ludovico Einaudi, and on my YouTube page. And it's been released, at the wishes of her family and close friends. And I hope you enjoy it. Loss is an empty feeling. When you worsened, bits started to break and we broke with you. It was surreal to see you held down by drips and wires, as though any second you'd stand, turn off the ventilator, shake loose the tubes and dance like you did on DPU. Drip poles as props, a microphone, maybe. Your singing laughter filling the space. I half expected your bruised arms to turn into wings and fly from this place. Did you hear our voices? Feel us hold your feathers where hands used to be. I think you will transcend, living on in these fragments of memories. We'll carry you with us, take refuge in them, be better nurses and people in your honor. Hundreds of people attended memorials for you in hospitals and churches. They clapped for you in the same car park you clapped. Priests and princes prayed for you. Flags were flown at half-mast, and your cathedral held you in their memory. I'm sure you would have been embarrassed by all the fuss. But you should have seen it. Your family asked us to wear white, bring white flowers. When you died, it snowed for a week and all of Norwich wore white. People made snow angels and saw robins and swans watching them in the snow. Maybe you never left. And then suddenly it was spring. The snow melted. I saw the first rose of the year. It made me think of your smile. I've been going to churches, trying to find some peace, I think. I'd never seen the wishing tree in the hospital chapel garden with a single bird on it. Today, it was so full of birds they looked like leaves in the half-light. Until they moved, their tiny beaks silhouetted by the warm light of the setting sun. Their singing laughter filling the space. Thank you very much. This last piece was released in association with Tom and another poet friend of ours, set to music by somebody based in Norwich called Marimo Beats, and released with the BBC as the 100-year anniversary of the end of the First World War, as part of the Armistice Day celebrations. And they wanted us to talk about the war in a different way, kind of reimagine some of the wartime poetry of the time, and kind of put our own spin on it. I thought it was quite interesting now because that was such a big part of our cultural history and had such a big impact on the world and the lives of especially young people at the time. And in the years immediately afterwards, I felt like it was quite an interesting way of looking at kind of the COVID pandemic now and the impact that will probably have on, our young people moving forwards and us moving forwards. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for having me. And it's called To Those Left Behind. To those left behind, surrounded by women all worn out with worry, barely holding on to hope but holding on. Children whose golden years have been ground down for global politics, and shrunken men and women, hands all fissures and gnarls in sparrow-like fragility. All powerless, but together. United in this kingdom, she knows war never changes. War never changes, but this one's great. This one's the last to end them all. It's been so bad. She knows she'll find no shelter in the shell holes, but he'll be back. He'll be back. And they say the kids will grow and live in this brave new world. They say worry not. But she can't not worry when the worry starts. Then she gets the telegram. It all falls apart. It's October 1918. The frozen grass holds the morning mist over a sky so clear it cuts, and she can see him. She can see him, dreamlike, standing at her open door, vivid in the light, contrast enhanced and smiling that incredible smile. He'd be perfect forever there, where the day spills its watercolor into the dusk, no different to when she'd waved him off, and his hair a slow wave she could sink into. She'd have got lost in his hair if she could, arms outstretched, spinning like a playground pup, all glee. She loved wild things wildly and soft things softly, and loved feeling all lazy in his soft safety. She imagines dancing with him at the front, or her image of it from illustrations, or quagmires and blackened stumps, stark and dystopian monochrome, and breathing as one with him, one last. How did he die? Did they pull him from the rubble, powdered grey, ghost-like and crying? Did he die like a gladiator learned to die, to save face, sat up, a scarlet shock leaping from his sepia chest? Did he have a good death? Is there a good death? She'll never know. And it's the not knowing that hurts the worst. She sees his empty hearse. No, there is no glory in death, but is there glory in life from death? Her wet eyes bring her back into her skin. Her anger stings within. She feels wronged, but she knows bloodthirsty people should bite their tongues. And it's been a few months now that he's been gone. And the bevel-tipped bad news stings less now, slightly, so she absorbs her disorder somehow nightly. And whenever she sees those signs saying, "Dad's on the front line, what are you doing to those he left behind?" she knows she's doing him proud. It's October 1918 now. The morning's crisp. She pulls her coat in tight, breathes more mist into being, squinting at the sun, barely seeing. And the day has just begun, so she knows the cold, soft focus of the fog will be burnt away eventually, and all will be warm, and nothing else will hurt, and at the factory there'll be moments she'll forget that he's gone. She knows war never changes, but at least this is the last one. At least this is the last one. Thank you so much for having me. I've been Piers Harrison Reid. Enjoy the rest of the show.
That was Piers Harrison Reid, ladies and gentlemen. All of the links for people that are performing are down below, and I am extremely pleased and proud to introduce the final poet for this evening, Imogen Sterling. I know it's going to be great, so please do stick around, check it out. Imogen Sterling.
Hello. Thank you so much, Tom, for having me as a part of your event today. I am such a fan of your work, and I'm really excited to be involved in the, at least, digital celebration of your new launch. It's all immensely exciting, so thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of it. My name is Imogen. I am a poet, theatre maker and musician based in Glasgow. And today I'm just going to be sharing a couple of longish pieces for you as part of this event. I have been thinking a lot about place and location and home recently, given that we are spending so much time in the same place at the moment. As I say, I'm based in Glasgow, and this is certainly the longest that I've spent in the city, and I've got to know it and all of its nuances in a way that I haven't ever before in the considerable length of time that I've stayed here. So with that in mind, I've chosen two pieces today that are odes to the city, I suppose, in different ways. And while I'm likely not performing for a Glasgow familiar audience tonight, I really hope that you take something from the pieces and that they resonate with you and your home space, wherever that might be. So this first piece is simply called Glasgow, and it goes like this. It was written retrospectively on a hungover come down mega bus journey, because the years have taught me there is no other way to leave this city, Glasgow, my Glasgow. Well, hello again. You were a kick to the stomach, all right. On arrival, I anticipated the quiet before a midnight fist fight, because, let's be honest, last time we did not have the kindest goodbye, but Glasgow, you're still looking so very fine now. OMG. Oh my Glasgow, it's been years, I've been so far from you, so why are your arms still home to me? Why this yin and yang unity? Why does bed with you come so naturally? When I broke my back trying to break your mold, trying to cast off your embrace, save face and forget you, Glasgow. Easier said than done, I suppose, because I ventured back and you dragged me back into the doldrums I evaded. Reintroduced the addiction I did not know I was craving, submerging me once again in that sweet, smoky haze of tedium. I, the one that always threatens mediocre consumption, but on this occasion, you shot the mundanity through with laser beams. You pulled the rug from underneath my feet. For once I fought to match your pace as you dared me accuse you of complacency. And see, you were quick to reveal the joys you once hinted at. Because Glasgow, you push boys at me with words and wit and voices. What choice do I have but to submit to you, Glasgow? You bluffer, you temptress, your heroes, old friends, and new lovers, new friends, and old lovers, Glasgow. What a well-constructed mess you stay. You will push me to the edge one day, but for now, I can't help but think you are class. You are class and utterly classless. You are totally fucked before it's even sunset. You're throwing up on your ex's carpet, waking up in a flat you don't remember coming back to, but Glasgow still. Your books and prints, and the people who publish them, you are flasks of tea in autumnal gardens. You are old school vintage meets modern idiocy, paradoxical beauty steeped in inconsistency, Glasgow. You offered me the warmest welcome at your contrary expense of feeling lonesome. With you, there's always a catch. You're a need never sated. You will present reconnection, but it comes with isolation. You are the champion, all overthinking and imaginary demons overwrought but still thoughtless. And the hypocrisy is, if you thought less, you'd see that you are the waves of mixed signals in my sea of clarity. Yet Glasgow, somehow, you're still spontaneity. Your great slams and shit gigs. Your pints of cider, overpriced wine, banana-fueled coffee, Glasgow, you're popping, you're cut into lines, your powder bright. Why does nothing shine quite like the Queen's Park sunlight? Glasgow, you whisper temptations to me. Possibilities of redemption and reconciliation. And Glasgow, in doing so, your accent, it's American, is Indian, Romanian. Glasgow, where are you? Whose are you? You're hussy, you're not just mine. Are you? No, Glasgow, you're hers. You're his and theirs. And you draw us together until we are one. And my Glasgow's wine-muddled headache takes the hand of his Glasgow's 5 a.m. frosty start. My Glasgow sits spellbound at the speed of his Glasgow's bars. My, oh my Glasgow, where did he learn to write like that? Her Glasgow is all talk but lonely nights. Can't see my Glasgow's lonely too sometimes. His Glasgow is chaos while her Glasgow's just getting by. His Glasgow can't see when it's okay to cry. His Glasgow's in madness while her Glasgow oscillates. My Glasgow checks Facebook too often, looking for his Glasgow's responses. Our Glasgow knows it can get away with too much. Because our Glasgow's a cunt, but our Glasgow's a good cunt, in fact, is the best one. So Glasgow, I must confess that to deny you any less would be to ignore the storm in which we two are drenched. So do me a favour. Contain your belligerence, Glasgow, if I give you a second chance. Will you please this time be different? Thank you. That was my love-hate ode to Glasgow, the city that I've spent the good part of the past decade in by this point, which is quite something. I am now going to share my second and final piece, as you'll see they're quite long. This piece is the introductory poem to a show that I'm working on right now. It's a gig poetry show, if I can coin that term, a real merging of poetry and music and theatre. And the show tells the story of the 7 deadly sins, but sets them as characters within a contemporary Scottish cityscape, which may not necessarily be named as Glasgow, but certainly is modelled upon this city. And this piece emerges at the start of the show. It sets the scene of the stories to come. It is the introduction to my new show, Love the Sinner, and I hope that you enjoy listening to it. Cast from the mind of a Greek, they are 7. Etched in memory and manuscript, they act as guide, warning, and legend. Crude definitions, caught somewhere between complex and simple, their cardinal intelligence documents a testament of misdemeanor. Impressive, really. See their history and stature standing as pinnacles, their vision held terrific vastness. They span millennia to tell us of sin. Steadfast through time, whittled by Christian teaching, made media darlings iconic. They shrink, as time will do, adjust, as time will have. Watch them hone. See relics turn to roads, tomes to tweets. See ruins rebuild a smog-filled city, litter-lined 9-to-5 grind, club strip, ashen tips, parks and dogs and tedium. Pavements slick with oily rainbows dissolved in Scottish rain. Scholars, now derobed, costumed back as vintage students, pierced and dyed in electronic faces, washed in android brightness. This city stamps its feet to shake the dust off times gone by. See now a city bladed with criticism, laden with expectation. See a city toned by filters, lined with billboards. See a city that blurs its rough edges. Our 7 find themselves rough edges. Their names softened for heavier tongues, shortened for quicker thumbs. Time has turned them mediocre. Though their legends are huge, their legacies tiny, compressed by the boredom of modern society. Squint. Just there. And you might catch a glimpse of greed as she smokes through paint-stripped dirt street window. Her sighs mingle with the groans of pride hefting weights in the gym. He makes the most of his lunch break. Sloth could not imagine it. She is 3 days deep in Netflix binge, her bedroom stale and crisps trampled into carpet. Her mum won't like it. 2 skinny lattes and gluten-free brownies to go at Gluttony's Cafe, but not for him. He's on kitchen duty, living off tip share by a waitress who pities him. Across the street, wrath is biting her tongue from spitting her vitriol. Lust lays lethargic and pitiful, while envy, paranoia prone and prosaic, succumbs to Facebook inadequacy. Our 7 exist in urban stupor. Alive and brutally kicking, they stand each a phrase in the lore, no less, no more. Yet their minds twist in knots at the state of themselves amidst it all. Eyes of judgment are everywhere. You cannot move for the weight of its stare. Coddled by scrutiny, led towards betterment, these 7 have solid roots set into history, but today has taught them vulnerability. You'll find them lost in the self-help shelves of Waterstones, sneaking quiet minutes to seek answers in pages. You will find them counting wages. You'll find them trapped in the anti-social rabbit hole of Instagram. You'll find them buried under labels, under labels, under labels. You will find them smothering anxiety, these champions of self-diagnosis with the number for breathing space saved on their phones, just in case. 7 kintsugi creations, all golden scar and candid despondency, objects of squandered love. Their city considers them trash. Society holds them as flawed. They're taught they're the villains within their own stories. They're taught they are sinners. Thank you so much. That was the introductory piece from Love the Sinner, a project that's in development at the moment. Thank you so much, Tom, again for having me as part of your event. It has been such a pleasure to reconnect virtually, and I wish you all the success for this exciting new launch. Thank you.
And that's everything. Thank you so much for joining the book launch. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, and you've got people that haven't joined but you think would enjoy it, please do share. Make sure to check it out. Show love for Letters Never Sent. Buy it if you haven't bought it. Like, comment, subscribe to all of the YouTube stuff. Show as much love as possible. And I really appreciate you sharing this event with me, and also everyone that shared this journey with me. I really do. It means the world, and I can't overstate just how much everything, all of this means, and how much I appreciate it. Also, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this event. And until the next one, peace.